The shimmering cage. Dusty Rivers squinted, the morning sun already beating down on his weathered face. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the cracked earth, the dust swirling around the dark liquid like a miniature tornado. The cattle lowed, a mournful sound that echoed across the desolate landscape, a soundtrack to his solitude. He nudged his horse, Jericho, forward, the rhythmic creak of the saddle a familiar comfort. Another day, another dollar, he thought, though the dollars were getting harder and harder to come by. The drought had choked the land, leaving his ranch parched and struggling. He'd already sold off half his herd just to keep the rest alive. He scanned the horizon, a habit ingrained over years of ranching. Nothing but scrub brush, cacti, and the endless expanse of the desert stretching towards the shimmering, distant mountains. He was a speck in this vastness, easily forgotten, easily swallowed. Then he saw it, a flicker, a shimmer. It was far off, almost swallowed by the heat haze, but it was there, something reflecting the harsh sunlight, something that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. Curiosity, a rare and unwelcome visitor, tugged at him. He usually avoided anything out of the ordinary. Trouble always followed things that didn't belong. But the shimmer persisted, a tiny beacon in the monotony of his existence. He shifted in the saddle. "Come on, Jericho," he muttered, urging the horse in that direction. "Let's see what we got here." The ride was slow and arduous. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth and turning the air thick and heavy. The shimmering object remained tantalizingly distant, seeming to retreat with every step they took. Dusty swigged from his canteen, the water lukewarm but refreshing. Jericho plodded on, his hooves kicking up small clouds of dust. As they drew closer, the shimmer resolved into something more defined. It was a cage, an iron cage, standing incongruously in the middle of the desert. Dusty reined in Jericho, his brow furrowed. What a world! He dismounted, the heat radiating off the ground, scorching his boots. He tied Jericho to a nearby Joshua tree, the horse snorting and pawing the ground, clearly as puzzled as he was. He approached the cage cautiously, his hand instinctively resting on the handle of his worn revolver. He'd seen strange things out in the desert before, remnants of forgotten mines, rusted-out cars, the occasional bleached skeleton, but nothing like this. The cage was about 8 feet tall, constructed from thick iron bars, intricately woven together in a complex geometric pattern. It wasn't just a simple rectangular box. The bars curved and twisted, forming arches and spirals, creating a delicate, almost beautiful structure. The craftsmanship was exquisite, unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was old, too. The iron was pitted and rusted, but the construction was solid, unyielding. He circled the cage, examining it from every angle. There was no door, no visible means of entry or exit. The bars were spaced close enough to prevent anything larger than a rabbit from squeezing through. He ran his hand along the cool metal, feeling the intricate carvings beneath his fingertips. Strange symbols were etched into the bars, symbols he didn't recognize. They looked almost alien. The shimmer he'd seen from afar wasn't just sunlight reflecting off the metal. It was something else, something emanating from within the cage itself. A subtle, almost imperceptible distortion of air around it, like heat rising off asphalt, but different. It was mesmerizing, unsettling. He leaned closer, peering into the cage's interior. It was empty, or at least it appeared to be. The shadows within the cage were deep and impenetrable, obscuring anything that might be lurking inside. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the cool iron. He hesitated. There was something about this cage, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A feeling of wrongness, of something not quite right. He tested one of the bars, pushing against it with all his might. It didn't budge. The cage was solid, immovable. It was as if it had been there for centuries, rooted to the earth. He pulled back his hand, a sense of unease creeping into his heart. Who had built this cage? And why? What was it meant to contain? He looked around, scanning the empty desert. There were no tracks, no signs of anyone having been here recently. Just the cage, standing alone and silent in the vast emptiness. He pulled out his canteen again, his hand shaking slightly. He took a long drink, trying to wash away the feeling of dread that was beginning to settle over him. He knew one thing for sure. This cage was not a natural occurrence. It was something else, something that didn't belong in this world. And he had a feeling that his lonely existence had just taken a very strange turn. Lily of the Sands. The cage hummed, a low thrum that vibrated in Dusty's teeth. He circled it again, the setting sun painting the iron bars in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. He wasn't any closer to understanding what it was or why it was here. Just a growing sense of unease, a prickling at the back of his neck that told him he should turn around, climb back on his horse, and pretend he never saw it. But something held him back. A flicker of movement within the cage's shadows. Dusty squinted, his hand instinctively moving to the worn handle of the revolver holstered at his hip. "Hello," he called out, his voice raspy from the dry desert air. Silence. Only the whisper of the wind and the cage's persistent hum answered him. He took a tentative step closer, the dust crunching under his boots. He peered through the bars, his eyes struggling to adjust to the gloom inside. And then he saw her. A girl, huddled in the far corner, knees drawn to her chest, a small, worn teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. She was small, fragile-looking, with tangled, dark hair that framed a pale face. Dusty estimated she couldn't be older than 7 or 8. "Hey there," he said softly, lowering his hand from his gun. "It's all right. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge his presence. She just stared at him, her large, dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, something Dusty couldn't quite decipher. Curiosity, maybe? Or maybe just shock. He knelt down, trying to make himself seem less threatening. The iron of the cage was cold beneath his fingertips. "My name's Dusty. What's yours?" Still nothing. Only the rhythmic rise and fall of her small chest. He tried a different approach. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of jerky, the last of his midday snack. He held it out towards her. "Want some?" Her eyes flickered to the jerky, then back to his face. He saw a faint tremor in her lower lip. He kept his hand steady, offering the food in silence. After a long moment, she slowly, hesitantly, reached out a small hand. Her fingers brushed against his as she took the jerky. Her skin was cold, almost clammy. She didn't eat it right away. She just held it, staring at it as if she'd never seen anything like it before. "It's beef jerky," Dusty explained gently. "Dried meat. Good for traveling." She finally took a small bite, chewing slowly, her eyes never leaving his. He could see the wariness in them, the guardedness. But he also saw something else. A spark of intelligence, a hint of resilience that belied her fragile appearance. "What's your name?" he asked again, keeping his voice low and soothing. This time, she answered. Her voice was barely a whisper, raspy and thin. "Lily," she said. "Lily Stardust." Dusty nodded. "Lily, that's a pretty name." He paused, considering his next words. "Lily, what did you get in there?" He gestured to the cage. Her eyes darted around the cage, as if reliving a nightmare. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She clutched the teddy bear tighter. I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I just woke up here." Dusty frowned. He didn't believe her. Not entirely. There was something she wasn't saying, something she was holding back. But he wasn't going to push her. Not yet. The sun was sinking below the horizon now, casting long, distorted shadows across the desert floor. The temperature was dropping rapidly. He needed to get her out of here, and fast. "Lily," he said, standing up. "It's getting dark. It's not safe to stay out here. I'm going to take you back to my ranch. You'll be safe there." He held out his hand. She looked at his hand, then back at his face, her eyes searching his. He kept his expression neutral, hoping she could see the sincerity in his offer. After another long, agonizing moment, she reached out and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Dusty gently pulled her to her feet. She was even smaller than he'd thought. Her hand felt tiny in his. As he led her away from the cage, he glanced back at the alien symbols etched into the iron bars. They seemed to glow faintly in the twilight, a silent, unsettling reminder of the mystery he had stumbled upon. He didn't know who Lily Stardust was or how she'd ended up in that cage. But he knew one thing. His solitary life had just taken a turn he never could have predicted. Breaking the chains, Dusty circled the cage, its metallic bars gleaming tauntingly under the dying sun. Lily's wide eyes followed his movements, twin beacons in the encroaching twilight, reflecting the sunset's orange glow like trapped fireflies. Her silent appeal, laced with apprehension, was a tangible thing. He had to free her. Kneeling, the coarse sand rasped against his skin. The lock, a barbaric hunk of iron riddled with decay, seemed frozen in time, perhaps by more than mere neglect. He rifled through his saddlebag, producing his arsenal, a battered wrench, a screwdriver sporting a fractured handle, and pliers with jaws askew from years of abuse. Hardly a locksmith's kit, yet they were his only options. "Might take a bit," he muttered, as much to bolster his own resolve as to comfort her. He began with the wrench, attempting leverage on the stubborn shackle. The aged metal protested with a low groan, yet the lock held fast. He pushed, muscles straining, the acrid tang of rust filling his lungs. Futile. He exchanged the wrench for the screwdriver, trying to wedge it into the lock's heart, hoping to manipulate the inner mechanisms. It slipped, scraping harshly against the iron, spitting a brief cascade of sparks into the sand. Lily recoiled, shrinking back into the cage's shadows. "Careful," she breathed, her voice a fragile thread against the whispering wind. Dusty swiped a streak of grime across his forehead. The sun dipped further, stretching long, grotesque figures across the arid landscape. A premonition of the desert night's chill began to prick his skin. Time was draining away. Next, the pliers clamped onto the shackle, twisting with every ounce of strength he possessed. They skidded, biting into the corroded metal, but the lock remained unyielding. Frustration, sharp and bitter, rose within him. He was a fixer, a mender of broken things, a coaxer of life from failing machinery. This was different. This lock felt spiteful, an act of defiance. He paused, inhaling deeply, fighting to quell the rising tide of anger. He looked at Lily, her face a pale mask in the fading light. He couldn't let her down. The sheer vastness of the desert pressed in on him, the endless horizon a mocking reminder of his isolation. He thought of those solitary years on the ranch, wrestling with the unforgiving land, battling drought, scratching out a meager existence. He knew solitude, thrived in it even. But Lily, caged, vulnerable, terrified, had ignited something new within him, a fierce protectiveness, a profound sense of responsibility. It defied explanation, but he understood one thing. He wouldn't abandon her. He picked up the wrench, his grip tightening on the scarred handle, positioning it with care against the shackle, bracing himself. He drew a steadying breath, and with a grunt born of sheer will, he hammered the wrench against the lock. The iron emitted a piercing shriek that sliced through the desert silence. The lock twisted but remained intact. Again and again, he struck, each blow fueled by desperation and an escalating urgency. Lily watched, her eyes wide, reflecting a volatile mix of dread and burgeoning hope. He saw tears tracing paths down her cheeks. He swung one final time, channeling every fiber of his being into the impact. This time the sound was different, a clean, resonant crack that reverberated through the metal. The lock convulsed, then, with a final, grinding sigh, it gave way. The shackle clattered to the ground. Dusty stood there, chest heaving, muscles trembling, the wrench still fused to his hand. He stared at the shattered lock, its ruined pieces littering the sand. He'd done it. He'd sprung the trap. He turned to Lily, her eyes luminous with unshed tears. "It's open," he rasped, his voice thick with exhaustion. "You're free. Homecoming." The desert air sharpened, a bracing contrast to the day's oven-like heat as Dusty steered Lily away from the derelict site. His hand rested lightly on her arm, a gesture of reassurance, not constraint. Her movements were stilted, each footfall a reminder of her captivity, and he shortened his stride to match her hesitant rhythm. The trek back felt markedly longer than before. Though the sunset splashed the horizon with fiery hues of coral and plum, Lily remained earthbound, her face hidden behind a curtain of dark hair. Dusty attempted to break the silence. "It's humble," he offered, nodding toward the faraway glimmer that signified home, "but it's secure. And there's food, actual sustenance." A fleeting expression, perhaps nascent curiosity, perhaps fragile hope, flickered in the subtle lift of her chin. The ranch house was a modest dwelling, weathered by years under the relentless sun and scouring wind. The porch swing emitted a plaintive creak in the gathering breeze. Inside, Dusty ushered her into a space redolent with dust and aged wood. He ignited a kerosene lamp. Its gentle radiance bathed the main room. Lily paused at the threshold, her eyes widening as she absorbed the scene. The room's furnishings were sparse: a time-worn leather couch, a wooden table flanked by 2 chairs, a bookshelf groaning under the weight of paperbacks. A thick rug softened the floor. Simple, yes, but undeniably a haven. "Bathrooms that way." Dusty indicated a nearby door. "The hot water could be fickle, but there's soap and towels." He paused, then added, "And I think I've got some clothes that might fit. Not new, but clean." Finally, she spoke, her voice a low, gravelly murmur. "Why?" The directness of the question caught Dusty off guard. "Why what? Why are you doing this?" He shrugged, raking a hand through his already unruly hair. "Beats me. Felt like the decent thing. You were caged. Nobody deserves that." Her gaze remained fixed, inscrutable. He felt her probing, searching for ulterior motives. To dissipate the mounting tension, he busied himself with supper preparations. He unearthed a can of beef stew from the pantry, along with a loaf of bread, a bit stale but palatable. As the stew simmered on the stove, its savory fragrance permeating the air, Dusty located a set of older garments in the recesses of his closet: faded jeans and a well-worn flannel shirt. These he placed on the couch, along with a fresh towel. "Probably an improvement," he stated neutrally. Without a word, Lily gathered the clothes and disappeared into the bathroom. The soft whisper of running water reached him, and he pictured her shedding the accumulated filth of her ordeal. He set the table with 2 bowls and spoons. When Lily reemerged, she was transformed, cleaner, yet still bearing a visible fragility. The clothes, though oversized and shapeless on her petite form, were a vast improvement over her previous attire. She settled at the table, her attention riveted on the steaming bowl. Dusty watched, attentive, as she tentatively tasted the stew. A subtle widening of her eyes betrayed her reaction. "Nothing special," he said, "but it'll fill you up." She ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each mouthful. Dusty picked at his own meal, his gaze mostly on her, trying to unravel the enigma of her existence. For where had she come? Who had imprisoned her? And what was the reason? After they finished, Dusty cleared the remnants of their meal. "There's a bed in the spare room," he said. "Not exactly luxurious, but it's a bed." Lily only offered a quiet nod, her expression distant. He led her to the small, plainly appointed room. It held a simple cot, a small nightstand, and a window framing the vast, silent reach of the desert. "Sleep well," he offered, lingering in the doorway. "Thank you," she breathed, the words almost inaudible. Dusty quietly closed the door, leaving her to the solitude of the room. He returned to the main area, doused the lamp, and settled onto the creaking porch swing. The desert night pulsed with life, the chorus of crickets, the distant lament of a coyote. He gazed up at the celestial tapestry, wondering what lay ahead. He had taken a stranger into his life, a woman burdened by a dark past. He had no inkling of what he had committed himself to, but he knew one thing. He simply couldn't abandon her to her fate. Whispers of the past. The following morning dawned with a pale, watery sun that did little to dispel the chill clinging to the ranch. Dusty found Lily sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in the quilt he'd given her, staring out at the arid landscape. She was a small, still figure against the vastness, and for a moment, he hesitated to disturb her solitude. He made her breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, hoping the familiar comfort of the meal would ease her anxieties. He placed the plate on the porch beside her, the clink of the ceramic the only sound. "Morning," he said softly, settling into the opposite swing. Lily didn't turn, but her eyes flickered to the plate. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the swing and the distant caw of a crow. Dusty watched her, his gaze gentle. He knew pushing her would only drive her further into herself. Patience, he figured, was the only currency he had to offer. Finally, she picked at the eggs with a fork, her movements hesitant. "It's good," she mumbled. "Glad to hear it," Dusty replied, forcing a casual tone. "You eat up. You need your strength." She ate a few more bites before pushing the plate away, unfinished. "Dusty," she said, her voice barely a whisper. It was the first time she'd used his name. He met her gaze, his heart quickening slightly. "Yeah, Lily." Before the cage. She began, then stopped, her brow furrowing. I remember colors. Bright colors. Not like here. Like a garden." Dusty leaned forward, intrigued. "A garden? You remember a garden?" She nodded slowly, her eyes unfocused, as if seeing the memory unfold before her. Flowers, so many flowers. And music. Not from a radio. From something else. She shivered, pulling the quilt tighter around herself. "But it's all hazy, like a dream." He resisted the urge to press her, sensing the fragility of the memory. "Dreams can be real, Lily. Sometimes they're all we have." She looked at him, her eyes searching. "Do you have dreams, Dusty?" "Sure," he chuckled, a dry sound, "mostly about rain, and finding a decent price for beef." She didn't laugh. "I dream about flying, over those gardens. But then the cage is there. Always the cage." Her voice cracked. Dusty's gut clenched. He wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but he sensed she wasn't ready for physical touch. "The cage is gone now, Lily. You're safe here." She was silent for a long moment, staring at her hands. I think I'm different." Dusty frowned. "Different how?" "I don't know," she said, frustration lacing her voice. I feel things. Things I can't explain. Like knowing what someone is going to say before they say it. Or feeling the rain coming before the clouds even appear." Dusty felt a prickle of unease. He'd always been a practical man, a man of the earth. But he couldn't deny the intensity in Lily's eyes, the genuine confusion and fear in her voice. He thought of the cage, the odd symbols etched into its metal, the inexplicable feeling he'd had when he first saw it. Maybe you're just more sensitive than most," he said, choosing his words carefully. "After what you've been through, it's understandable." She shook her head. "No, it's more than that. Sometimes I see things. Flashes. Things that aren't there. Like shadows moving when there's no one around." She wrapped her arms around herself, her voice trembling. Am I going crazy?" Dusty reached out and gently covered her hand with his. Her skin was cool to the touch. "No, Lily, you're not going crazy. You're just remembering. Trying to make sense of things." He squeezed her hand lightly. "We'll figure it out. Together." He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that whatever Lily had been through, whatever made her different, it was tied to that cage. And he wouldn't rest until he understood it. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the parched earth, Lily leaned against him, her small body trembling. Dusty held her close, offering what little comfort he could. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't let anything hurt her again. Not if he could help it. The whispers of the past were faint, fragmented, but they were there. And Dusty knew, with a growing sense of dread, that they were just the beginning. Strange tides. The wind howled, a banshee wail that clawed at the corrugated iron roof of the ranch house. It wasn't the usual desert wind, the kind that brought dust devils and the promise of a dry heat. This was different. This wind felt angry. The sun, moments before beating down with relentless ferocity, was now obscured by a swirling curtain of sand, a miniature storm cell trapped within the valley. Dusty squinted, pushing open the barn door against the gale. Inside, the horses were agitated, hooves drumming against the packed earth floor. Their eyes rolled white, nostrils flared, and a nervous energy filled the air. Even Maggie, the old mare usually placid as a summer pond, was skittish, tossing her head and whinnying in distress. "Easy, girl," Dusty murmured, reaching out to stroke Maggie's neck. But his voice did little to soothe her. They weren't reacting to the wind. It felt like something else was bothering them. Something unseen. Lily was inside the house, huddled by the window, her small face pale. The storm pressed against the glass, throwing shadows that danced like phantoms. She didn't speak, only watched with those unnerving, wide eyes. "Just a bit of weather, Lily Bug," Dusty said, trying to sound reassuring, though he wasn't feeling it himself. He grabbed his rifle from the rack, a purely instinctive action. "I'll check the perimeter, make sure nothing's come loose." Outside, the temperature had spiked. The wind burned his skin, carrying the scent of ozone and something else, something acrid and metallic, like old blood. The tumbleweeds, normally skipping harmlessly across the landscape, were now battering against the fence with violent force. The chickens were gone, vanished. He let them out to peck around the yard that morning. Now, not a feather remained, not even a cluck. That was wrong. He circled the house, rifle held loosely but ready. The storm seemed to intensify around him, the air thick and heavy. He noticed a strange, shimmering heat haze rising from the ground near the old well. It wasn't the usual mirage effect. This was more like looking through distorted glass. Back inside, Lily hadn't moved. She was still by the window, her gaze fixed on something beyond the swirling sand. He followed her line of sight, but saw nothing but the storm. The wind abruptly died. Just like that, the howling stopped, the sand settled, and the sun blazed through the clearing sky. The sudden silence was almost as unnerving as the storm. Dusty felt a prickling on the back of his neck. Something was different. The air felt charged, like before a lightning strike. He needed to understand what was happening. He remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago about the land, about secrets buried deep beneath the soil. Stories he dismissed as old wives' tales. Now those stories seemed relevant. He went to the main room. He knelt by the loose floorboard in the corner, the one he'd always known about, the one his grandfather had warned him never to touch. He pried it up with his knife, the wood groaning in protest. Beneath, nestled in a bed of dust and dried leaves, lay a book. It was old, bound in cracked leather, the pages yellowed and brittle. The title was obscured, the lettering faded almost to nothing. It felt heavy in his hands, heavier than it should. He opened it carefully. The pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams, alongside writing he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't any language he recognized. There were sketches of constellations, of strange, geometric patterns, and of creatures that looked both familiar and alien. One page depicted a cage, strikingly similar to the one where he'd found Lily. He flipped through the book, his heart pounding. This wasn't just some random collection of scribbles. This felt important, dangerous. Lily was standing behind him, her eyes wide with an expression he couldn't read. Fear? Recognition? Something else entirely? "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dusty closed the book, the leather cold against his fingers. "I don't know, Lily Bug," he said, his voice low, "but I think it might tell us why you're here." He paused, looking at the book, then at the fragile girl before him, and what we're up against. The Starchild Prophecy. Dusty sat hunched over the rough-hewn table, the old book splayed open before him. The kerosene lamp cast long, dancing shadows across the room, illuminating the strange symbols and drawings etched onto the brittle pages. He felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. The storm had passed, leaving an oppressive stillness in its wake, and the disappearance of the chickens still gnawed at him. He hadn't told Lily about that yet. He ran a calloused finger over a depiction of a celestial body, a starburst radiating lines of energy. The accompanying script was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a flowing, almost organic language that seemed to writhe on the page. He flipped back to the beginning, hoping for some kind of Rosetta Stone, a key to unlock the meaning. Lily watched him from her corner, her small frame curled up on the makeshift bed he'd made for her. She was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The storm had frightened her. He could tell, though she hadn't cried out or whimpered. Just retreated further into herself. "Just reading," he said, offering a weak smile. "Trying to figure out what this old thing is." She didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the book with an unreadable expression. He wondered what she made of it all, this strange new world she'd been thrust into. Hours crawled by. Dusty, painstakingly copied symbols onto a scrap of paper, trying to discern patterns, any kind of connection. He muttered under his breath, sounding out the unfamiliar shapes. Finally, something clicked. He remembered a phrase his grandmother used to say, something about the stars holding secrets. He dismissed it as old wives' tales then, but now. He cross-referenced a particular symbol, a spiral bisected by a single line, with another drawing, this one depicting a woman reaching towards the sky. Underneath, in slightly more legible script, was a word he could almost decipher, Starchild. He felt a chill run down his spine, despite the lingering heat from the earlier storm. Starchild. It sounded like something out of fairy tale, yet the weight of the book, the unsettling events of the past few days, lent it an undeniable gravity. He traced the spiral symbol again, his mind racing. The well, the heat haze, the missing chickens, it all felt connected, somehow. And then there was Lily, found locked in that strange cage. He turned back to the drawing of the woman, studying her face. It was stylized, almost abstract, but there was a sense of longing, of reaching for something beyond the earthly realm. And then he saw it, almost hidden in the background, a faint outline of the cage. The pieces began to fall into place, a terrifying mosaic of ancient magic and forgotten prophecies. He flipped through the pages, driven by a desperate need to understand. He found more references to the Starchild, prophecies detailing immense power, a being capable of reshaping the world. But there were warnings too, whispers of a great darkness that would seek to control this power. Dusty swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He looked at Lily, huddled in her corner, her eyes like pools of starlight in the dim light. Could it be possible? Could she be the Starchild spoken of in these ancient texts? He read on, his heart pounding in his chest. The book spoke of a lineage, a bloodline connected to the stars, imbued with the power to heal or destroy. It spoke of trials and tribulations, of a destiny fraught with danger. He found a passage that made his blood run cold. When the well runs dry and the shadows lengthen, the Starchild will awaken, and the world will tremble. The well, the chickens, the storm. It was all happening. And Lily. He closed the book with a snap, the sound echoing in the silence of the cabin. He looked at Lily again, his gaze filled with a mixture of fear and protectiveness. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Their lives had been irrevocably changed. He had stumbled upon something ancient and powerful, something that threatened to consume them both. And he, a solitary rancher struggling to survive a drought, was now the unlikely guardian of a prophecy. The sorcerer's shadow. Heat devil spun across the cracked fields, a taunt to Dusty's thirsting land. He narrowed his eyes, glove leather abrading his forehead as he peered into the distance. A novel tang stung the air, a metallic bite that sliced through the usual scent of sun-baked earth and sage. Instinct prickled his skin. Trouble was riding in. The horizon, a deceptively serene marriage of azure sky and fractured ground, held a growing darkness. A smudge against the blue, expanding with unnatural swiftness, like a predator stalking its prey. He didn't need to warn Lily. Already, she stood framed in the doorway, eyes wide and alight with apprehension. A low thrum vibrated through the very ground, resonating in his bones. He squeezed her shoulder, a silent promise. Whatever approached, they would meet it together. The approaching figure solidified into a horseman, wreathed in shadows that clung even under the desert's glare. The steed was night incarnate, its eyes gleaming with unsettling intelligence. As they neared, Dusty made out the rider's face, hollow-cheeked, pallid, framed by lank, greasy hair. Dark, penetrating eyes locked onto Lily with disturbing focus. A few yards from the porch, the rider halted his mount, the silence broken only by the beast's labored breaths. He dismounted with unsettling grace, movements fluid and unsettling as a viper's strike. Darkness seemed to deepen around him as he advanced. "Dusty Rivers," the rider rasped, a voice like stones grinding together, carried on the hot wind. "I am Mordeth. I have come for the girl." Dusty stood firm, muscles coiled, gaze unwavering. He kept his rifle at bay for now. This felt like a different battle, beyond the reach of lead. "She's not going anywhere with you." Mordeth's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "She is not yours to keep. The Star Child belongs with those who understand her destiny, those who can unlock her potential." He gestured towards Lily with a skeletal finger. "Come, child. Your hiding ends here." Lily recoiled, clutching the doorframe. Her gaze darted between Dusty and Mordeth, stark terror etched on her face. He felt her tremble, a trapped sparrow. Dusty moved to shield her. "She's just a child. Leave her be." Mordeth chuckled, a dry, humorless rasp. "A child? She is more than you can fathom. She holds the power to reshape reality, to usher in a new epoch." Unholy light flared in his eyes. But that power must be guided, controlled. Untamed, it could be catastrophic. "And you think you're fit to guide her?" Dusty spat, contempt flavoring his voice. "I see only avarice in your eyes." Mordeth's smile vanished, replaced by a glacial stare. "You presume too much, mortal. You cannot shield her. Her fate transcends this meager existence you offer." He extended a hand toward Lily, fingers twitching with restrained power. "Come, child. Embrace your gift. Embrace your destiny." Dusty's fist clenched. He wouldn't allow this sorcerer to steal her. He didn't grasp the reasons, but knew, in his gut, that Lily was destined for something more than to be a pawn in Mordeth's game. "She stays here," Dusty growled, voice a low threat. "With me." Mordeth's eyes narrowed, anger flickering within their depths. "You dare defy me?" The air hummed with suppressed energy, the surrounding shadows thickening, swirling like a sentient thing. "You are a fool, Rivers. You cannot withstand the power that is coming." "Maybe not," Dusty replied, his tone surprisingly steady. "But I'll damn sure try." He knew he was outmatched, outgunned, outmaneuvered in every way. Yet he possessed something Mordeth lacked, a fierce, unwavering resolve to safeguard the innocent, and a growing certainty that this fragile girl, this star child, held the key to their salvation. He braced himself, ready to confront whatever darkness Mordeth had unleashed. He wasn't merely protecting Lily. He was defending the world. Desert Bloom. The wind shrieked, a tormented spirit unleashed upon the plains. It savaged the ranch house, not with delicate brushes of sand, but with vicious, stinging lashings. Mordeth had unleashed his full wrath. Dusty pulled Lily behind him, a human bulwark against the onslaught as the windows juddered wildly. "Stay put," he shouted, his voice tight with strain. He squinted through the churning ochre haze, barely discerning the barn, a blurred specter in the tempest. "Just a dust devil, Lily. A fierce one, but we'll ride it out." But this was no ordinary storm. Phantoms danced at the edge of vision, distortions warping familiar sights into grotesque parodies. The windmill became a bony finger beckoning. The cacti sprouted watchful eyes. Mordeth reveled in their terror. "He's trying to break us," Lily breathed, her gaze unwavering, yet strangely composed. A faint, aureate light glimmered from her hands, almost lost in the swirling chaos. "He wants me to yield to fear." "Don't give him the satisfaction," Dusty urged, clasping her hand. Her skin burned against his. He felt a shiver course through her, a potent, untamed force yearning for release. "You're stronger than him, Lily. I know it." The illusion sharpened. A monstrous sandcrawler, its maw agape and pupils blazing like hot embers materialized from the dunes, blotting out what little light remained. Lily recoiled, but Dusty stood firm. He had to project strength, even as dread coiled in his gut. "Think of the desert's heart, Lily," he implored, his voice a thread against the storm's roar. "Think of the life thriving beneath the surface. The endurance, the beauty, it resides within you." He pictured delicate blossoms erupting through the parched soil after a fleeting rain, the hardy mesquites tenaciously gripping the canyon walls. The desert wasn't a sterile wasteland. It was a testament to fortitude, a grand, muted composition of latent power. Lily closed her eyes, her brow creased in concentration. The golden aura enveloping her hands intensified, pushing back against the encroaching gloom. The sandcrawler wavered, its incandescent glare fading. "I can sense it," she whispered, barely audible. "The life, the power." The storm seemed to pause, holding its breath. The wind ebbed slightly, the swirling sand lessening its frenzy. The illusions flickered, their grip on reality loosening. "Wield at Lily!" Dusty cried. Lily opened her eyes, and the golden light exploded. It wasn't a mere glimmer anymore. It was a blinding torrent of pure energy that surged across the ranch, banishing the darkness, silencing the wind's howl, and obliterating the illusions. The sandcrawler dissolved into shimmering motes. The skeletal windmill ceased to be, and the cacti resumed their silent watch. Mordith stumbled back, his form dissolving at the edges. He raised a hand, futilely attempting to shield himself from Lily's radiant aura. "Impossible," he croaked. "She's controlling the very desert?" The ground vibrated beneath Mordith's feet. Dusty, recalling the ancient washes and concealed depressions that laced the desert floor, recognized an opportunity. He seized Lily's hand, drawing her toward the safer ground of the porch. "Lily now," he yelled. "Focus your power. Let the earth consume him." Lily shut her eyes once more, drawing deeply from the inexhaustible wellspring within her. The vibration escalated. A fissure snaked across the sun-baked earth beneath Mordith's feet, widening into a yawning abyss. The sand, destabilized by the surge of energy, began to cave inward, creating a swirling vortex. Mordith screamed, flailing, desperately trying to escape the sinkhole's inexorable pull. But he was too late. The sand swallowed him whole, dragging him down into the blackness. His cries died away, consumed by the pitiless desert. Slowly, the sinkhole stabilized, the swirling sand settling into a deceptively placid surface. The storm had vanished. The ranch was bathed in the mellow, amber light of the setting sun. Dusty gazed at Lily, her face ashen but resolute. The golden aura had receded, leaving her looking drained but victorious. He embraced her tightly, holding her close. "You did it, Lily," he murmured, his voice thick with relief. "You saved us." She leaned into him, her frail body trembling. "We did it, Dusty," she corrected, her voice a mere whisper. "We did it together." They stood there, outlined against the setting sun, as the desert slowly returned to its tranquil stillness. The air was pure, the sky a tapestry of brilliant oranges and violets. A solitary coyote howled in the distance, a plaintive yet exquisite song echoing through the canyons. Dusty surveyed his land, the land he had nearly lost. It was scarred, weather-beaten, and unforgiving, yet it was also magnificent, tenacious, and brimming with life. And now it was secure. He looked down at Lily, the girl who had arrived as a stranger, a prisoner, and had now become his family. He understood that their ordeal was far from complete, that the shadow of Mordith still clung to the world. But as long as they stood together, as long as they confronted the future as one, he knew they could prevail. The desert bloom was a rare jewel, a testament to life's tenacity in the face of adversity. And in that instant, standing beside Lily, Dusty knew that their connection was equally unique, equally precious, and equally indomitable.